You're listening to Inside the Notes. I'm your host, Erica Block. Here we have the opportunity to listen to the stories that connect our musical family tree. First-hand accounts of performances, musicians, and mentors that shape the way we listen, learn, and teach. On today's episode, we are chatting with the incredible powerhouse mezzo-soprano Jamie Barton.
Hi there.
Thank you so much for coming today.
My pleasure.
I just want to jump right in because last night we got to enjoy Jamie's performance at the Bellingham Festival of Music, and I had the opportunity to be on the stage to watch this experience, and I want to talk about the energy and the adrenaline, because when you came out on stage, you have a beautiful calm. There's always the buzz of the excitement of the beginning of a concert, but you have a calm and you have a presence, and you get in there and you rip the roof off. And it was like 4 minutes of music and the whole place is screaming, standing ovation. People are going bizarre. It was so fun. But the tidal wave of energy that came to you was overwhelming. And I wanted to stand up and start high-fiving people like it was the end. I was so into it. So tell me about your preparation as you go into a performance like that, full of these arias. It was like greatest hits. And then immediately you receive this jolt of energy and love. How do you absorb it, siphon it off, and then go back out again and still remain your calm without just being packed with adrenaline?
Well, it's hard not to be. I mean, I was saying to Maestro Palmer last night, I think this is maybe the first time in my life that I got a standing ovation after my first song.
It's out of control.
It was nuts. It was absolutely nuts. You know, I quite honestly, not every audience has the energy that they brought last night. Mm-hmm. And it's always, sometimes it depends on the location. Literally, sometimes I've noticed in some countries like Spain, they are super emotive. They let you know exactly how they feel, and if they love it, man, they are going to rip the roof off. They are going to be screaming the house down. In other places in the United States, sometimes the audiences really, really, really enjoy it, but it's more of a reflective enjoyment than an outward shining of that. That being said, last night, Bellingham, they showed up.
They were enthused.
It was incredible. You know, I'm always really excited to get to do a concert like this. It's always a challenge.
Absolutely.
You know, singing, I was just in this masterclass I was mentioning that, you know, singing powerhouse aria after powerhouse aria it's a challenge. Mm-hmm. It's a real challenge because, you know, you don't have the entire opera to warm up to singing O Don Fatale. Right. You know, you have, you know, just your own warm-ups, and you've got to get into that mental space.
Yes.
But to be 1,000% honest, having an audience like the one last night, it makes it easy. Mm-hmm. It makes it so easy. I got to get out there. I flirted so hard with the audience.
Oh, they loved it.
It was so much fun. It was so much fun, especially, you know, during something like the habanera. It's kind of expected that there's going to be a little bit of a flirt.
Exactly.
You know, but that being said, they were so engaged. Mm-hmm. You know, and that comes down to an audience that's really happy to be there, and a performance happening on stage that captivates them. Mm-hmm. And that's, you know, I might be one of the headlining names for it. I might be the one out there singing the arias, but I'm not the only one out there. You know, everyone in the orchestra is there, everyone in the chorus, you know, everyone has a place there, and none of it is possible unless everything comes together. Mm-hmm. And I think last night really came together.
It had an incredible magical spark. And I love to talk about that on this podcast, those moments, those magic moments.
Yeah.
Can you think of a time where you were an attendee, a concert maybe when you were younger, that you left going, that was it?
You know, quite honestly, the first thing that comes to mind, and immediately in my mind, I started to divert it to, you know, more of a formal concert. But the first thing that came to mind that I think is the perfect example is actually when I was a kid. I grew up in the Northwest Georgia mountains. My family lived basically on the same land. We all had plots next to each other, that sort of thing. So all the Bartons are in one area, the Millers are in another area.
Right.
It's the same going down the valley. And my great aunt and uncle, who lived across the street from us, used to throw what they called pickins and grinnins, which is a very southern bluegrassy term.
Yes.
But people would bring out their bluegrass instruments, and it was just a big party where, these people from the age of, 0 up to 95 would be there. And it was a big community celebration. It was a big coming together of a whole bunch of people who, live in the same place and love each other and that sort of thing. Potluck, kids running around.
Right.
But the thing that I was there for was the pickin'. It was the bluegrass jam session. And it wasn't just the energy that I received from being there. It wasn't just the feeling that I had when I left those parties that made me just addicted to that sort of thing.
Yes.
But it was the energy that resided there with everyone, because it was a whole bunch of amateur musicians bringing whatever, instruments they had. Maybe they were in tune, maybe they weren't. But playing through every conceivable song that they could think of, just jamming together and creating this music. That was really, if I look back on my life, that was live performance for me in the very beginning.
Yes.
That was the first kind of thing that I experienced, the joy of live music. And to be able to, I never played an instrument. Piano is as close as I ever came, but learning how to hear harmony, learning how to have an ear for that, singing with my dad and him teaching me how to do that, and having these experiences of being a voice along with these instruments, creating this music together in, like I said, not a professional setting at all.
Right.
But in a purely joyful kind of way. That was, hook, line, and sinker right there, for sure. That is the genesis of my love of what we do.
It's beautiful.
Yeah.
And it's so raw, and it's the real love.
Yeah.
And then it translates into whatever. But you felt it. You felt the magic.
Oh, totally.
I love to talk about the enthusiasm. And in your masterclass, you were talking a little bit about the things upcoming and the excitement. I always wonder, especially with the kind of schedules that you're now starting to really see, your years are getting crazier and crazier, bigger and bigger, more Mount Everest moments. Sometimes, I'll go and look on your website and I am like, how is she going to do it all?
Honestly, I'm thinking the same thing sometimes.
So I just envy your energy, and I always just wonder, how do you find a way to not max out and poop out, quite frankly?
Yeah.
When you know something's coming, or when you get a new gig, someone says, oh, you just got blah, blah, blah. What makes you not like run to the score, listen to the music right away? How do you kind of pace yourself through these now bigger and bigger and bigger moments?
This is a very, very timely question, actually, for me, because really my career took off, as I say, in warp speed.
Yes.
After the summer of 2013, where I won BBC Cardiff Singer of the World. And that is a wonderful thing. The problems I have on my plate really are the problems of managing the amount of music that I have to process, sometimes learn, sometimes regurgitate, whatever. But it is a problem. It is an issue to manage, for sure. And let's see, that's been 6 years ago,
right.
And I'm still figuring that out. I would say, in answer to your question, I do that with a radical effort of balance, balance and self-care. Because there were a lot of, I think this is a very common thing, especially for people who are freelance musicians. There is a very feast or famine mentality.
Yes.
And there were years where I was absolutely in famine. There was just absolutely having to borrow money to be able to make ends meet, and working my tail off to get it there. And then all of a sudden I am in a bacchanalian feast
Right.
of this career.
Right.
And I remember after Cardiff, I sat down with my manager about 3 months afterwards. We had put kind of a pause button on accepting or denying anything that
Right.
came in after Cardiff, because there was a deluge of
Oh, I'm
offers.
sure.
And so at that 3-month mark, we sat down together and we went through every single offer, and we planned out kind of almost the next 5 years of my life.
Wow.
And I left that meeting. Quite honestly, I went over to Hell's Kitchen in New York, and I sat down in a bar and I ordered a drink and I started crying.
Yeah. I can understand so much. It's so overwhelming. You can't
Oh my gosh.
can't even begin to think about it.
Well, and to go from a place in the career of please hire me, please hire me, please hire me, to what do I do with all of this? I am sure in some way, I think most people in this career also deal with imposter syndrome.
Yeah.
And that was definitely dealt a huge hand at that point, because, here I go from nothing to everybody wants me and everybody has expectations. And how am I going to fill those expectations? When
Right.
are they going to realize that I'm a fraud? That imposter syndrome voice in the background there. But that weeping in a bar literally happened because, quite honestly, because A, I was terrified, and B, I was so just absolutely, I didn't know how I got that lucky, honestly, to be able to look down the road and know that I was going to be able to pay my bills for years to come. I never in my life as a traveling musician thought that I would ever encounter that. So nowadays,
Yeah.
the real trick is figuring out what to take on and what to not.
Yes.
I am still learning how to do that, and I have made missteps for sure. I kind of have what I call my rule of 3. Gig offers have to basically they have to satisfy at least 2 out of 3 things. They either have to be in a location that I really, really want to go to. It has to be an artistic project that I'm very interested in, or it has to pay all of the money.
Right. Right.
And it doesn't necessarily have to be all 3 of those.
Right.
It is the unicorn gig if you
Yeah.
get all 3 of
Yeah.
those. I am telling you from having sung on all kinds of stages in the world, that is a rare occurrence.
Right.
But it has to satisfy at least 2 of those things. And there have been times where I've had something that came along that was like an artistic project that I really was into, but it wasn't at a place that I really wanted to go to. It wasn't in a house or a concert hall that really meant anything to me, and it wasn't going to pay enough. And it was hard. That's the hardest kind to let go of.
Yep.
When I know that I have this opportunity to go do something that I really want to do, but it doesn't fulfill the other 2, because almost inevitably I get to that place, I get to that gig, and then I'm doing that gig, and no matter how much I wanted to do that gig going in, I'm sitting there and I'm exhausted. And I'm wondering, why did I just not take this time off?
Exactly.
Why am I not at home? Because part of managing the career and trying to have some semblance of balance in this really comes down to, for me, being able to have a life outside of this career.
Yes.
If you're looking at the pie chart of my life, the career at this point takes up probably 3/4.
Right.
It's easily 75% of my life. And that's probably a conservative guesstimate right there.
When you put in all the extra work and the travel and everything else.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Exactly. I mean, it's just so much. And I have run into, I'm very open about this because I think it's a subject that needs commiseration and needs highlighting. People need to talk about it. I have run into burnout. Absolutely. And that when I come down to it, I love this career. I love what I do. I cannot imagine myself doing anything else unless somebody were to say, "Hey, Jamie, do you want to open a cat cafe? You could make $1 million." I'd be like, "Okay, I'm quitting everything and getting a whole bunch of cats." Minus that.
The ultimate.
The ultimate. Minus that. This is a dream career.
Yeah, this is it.
You know, and I don't want to lose it. And it is in peril when you are burnt out.
Yep.
Both mentally, emotionally, for me, vocally. You know, when you physically burn out in some way and you're not able to do your job to the degree that you should be able to do your job, you run the risk of, you know, people being disappointed in you being disappointed, or you getting anxiety and that getting in your head.
Yes.
You know, there are so many ways in which burnout can really, really mess with a person. And so I'm doing everything I can these days to try and stave that off. It is there. It is always running in the background. I think it is for anybody who travels 90 to 95% of the year, which is what I do.
Exactly.
You know, but now I'm starting to take the steps forward to make sure that I have longevity in my career. One of them is my role of 3. Another step that I'm taking is adding in sabbaticals to my schedule. I know I've got the summer of 21 coming up, and I'm
which to the normal person would be like, I know I've got a vacation 2 years from now. That's gonna be great.
Well, exactly. And in between now and then, I have more time off.
Yes.
But to be able to say, okay, I know on my schedule I have 2 months that don't have anything in it right now.
Right.
I'm blocking that off.
Yep.
I'm not learning music during that.
Yes.
I'm doing this in a time where I can truly put the career down for a minute and then go pick up things like my family, my friends, my house. Oh my God, sleep on my Tempur-Pedic bed for 2 whole months. As long as I want. You know, I mean, I think it's really, really important. It took me until this year to understand that I needed that.
Yes.
Now, I'm an introvert. I am the kind of person and the kind of singer that I recharge by an absence of things. I recharge by an absence of people, by an absence of music. I recharge when my brain has the ability, my brain and body has the ability to take a step back, breathe a little bit, and come back to it refreshed. I know other people who can't do that. I know plenty of singers who, when they have vacations, they have to sing every single day in order to maintain their voice. I'm grateful that's not me, honestly. But I have to, one of the challenges is building in the space to be able to do that, because when I don't, then I get exhausted.
Exactly.
You know,
I heard you talking to some people in the masterclass about the upcoming year being particularly special because it's a lot of new stuff.
Oh my God.
Whereas last year I felt like was an adventure to watch you, because it was like, I'm doing an opera, now I'm doing Verdi, now I'm doing an opera, now I'm over here doing a different opera.
Yeah.
And that's so many characters, so much adventure, a lot of memorization. So going forward, oh, yay, new stuff. Do you have a way that you like to learn things in the different phases of just learning the score to the memorization to the character building? Do you have that on a nice rotating, multi-burner oven? How's it working?
I mean, I think some of the pots are on fire right now. Yes, to some degree, absolutely. In the best case scenario, I have a little bit of time. It could be a handful of days, or it could be a month before I go in for a new role, to be able to just, without the distraction of having to do other music at the same time, being able to just sink into the shoes of whatever character I'm doing or whatever concert I'm singing. That is not a luxury I think many of us are afforded with all of the time. I definitely have run into before and will continue to run into times where I have to be doing one project and learning the next one at the same time. And sometimes even vocally, that can be really, really difficult.
Absolutely.
But ideally, so I have ADHD. And one of the complications with that is that my brain very often, especially if I'm putting together new music, new compositions, very often my brain won't make sense of it until close to time. There's something about the pressure of you have to do this that helps focus my brain a little bit more. Sometimes that comes forward in the memorization of text. Sometimes it comes forward in, like I said, just literally making sense of the sound of the music and learning the notes on the page for me. My ADHD was very recently diagnosed. And so I can thank the miracle of modern medicine for helping me be able to focus a little bit more these days. And I'm hoping that I'll be able to do this a little further out. It has been a little bit of like a wish and a prayer and go.
A little scary.
Yeah. In learning stuff in the past. And it's actually...
It's incredible.
It's a challenge, but it's really nice to be able to put words and understanding to what that is and why my brain has sometimes functioned in a really frustrating way.
Right.
I just did a CD, all new composition by Jake Heggie. Wow. And some of the stuff was stuff that I had done before. A lot of it was brand new learns. And I was in the middle of doing a Rusalka at the same time. And so, I've got a month and a half worth of Rusalka rehearsals and performances, which I've done the role before, quite honestly. Yeji Baba's in about 2.5 scenes. So, it's fine. I've done it before. At least that was a familiar bit of territory. But I'm trying every day to sit down at the piano, and I'm telling you, for weeks, and Jake's music is fairly tonal. It makes a lot of sense to me in a lot of ways, but for weeks with some of these songs, I was sitting down and it was like I was looking at the music for the first time, day after day after day. And that's just how my brain works. Yeah. And so it took until kind of the last minute for some of those things to click in. Now, when they do, it's like, somebody has taken the blinders off and all of a sudden I see the sun and I'm like, wow, okay, here we are, Yeah. But that has definitely been a challenge. But my process, sorry, I totally deviated from your question.
It's super duper helpful. It's super duper helpful to people understand that everyone learns so differently.
Oh, yeah.
And you can't look at the person next to you and be like, they're learning faster than me.
Absolutely.
You just got to do it your way.
You have to know your process, learn your process, and be okay with that and prepare in advance for your process.
Yes.
For me, a lot of it, the very first step that I do, quite honestly, is going through my score and highlighting. And not just highlighting my line or something like that, but I am a big believer in, this probably comes from my ADHD brain, of highlighting. I have a color code that I highlight for all sorts of different, like, dynamic markings, accents. Triplets are always in green, like that awesome. Sort of thing. And so I go through and I do that. If the piece is in a foreign language, I go through and I do a transliteration if I need to, or a translation. I always try to do I do a translation that's as close to the words as I can, but then if it gets a little convoluted, I go in and I write in my own translation of what that combination of words means, that sort of
purpose.
thing.
Yeah.
But that grunt work can take days, honestly, depending on the piece you're doing. I mean, if I'm doing a Wagner opera, it's going to take a while. If I'm doing a shorter piece, it won't take as long. But that is absolutely like step number one, groundwork. And I can't start really learning a piece until that is done, until I'm prepared in the score. And then I start and I go measure by measure, honestly. Sometimes if it's a language that I'm not particularly familiar with, such as Swedish, I've done Sibelius songs in the past. You kind of have to go at those. I think like a pianist goes at playing melismatic passages.
Yes.
Sometimes you have to start at the end
Yes.
and go backwards.
Yes.
And I do that with syllables in languages that I don't know, or
cool.
in pieces where like the habanera, that was my first time singing it last night.
Really?
It really
You're
was.
kidding me. Oh
Yeah.
my gosh.
And hilariously enough, the second verse is really hard to memorize.
Interesting.
The setting of the text, for whatever reason, just wouldn't click into my brain. And I ended up going from the end of the second verse and building back syllable by syllable. Now, I'm familiar with French,
Right.
but there's something about building that muscle memory
Yes.
that makes it flow a little easier and makes it get in. So sometimes with scores, I have to do that. But then it's just a lot of repetition for me. It's a lot of repetition in terms of learning the music, learning the words, but also in terms of going through the score and saying, okay, what is the composer trying to do? How is the composer trying to tell the story? What is in the orchestra that is giving the flavor of emotion?
Right.
Why did we go from major to minor? You know, like
Right.
what is happening in the storytelling? What is happening in the dynamics? You know, like making choices about the emotional place of whoever I'm singing by what is in the score. And then the final piece for me is staying flexible. Because a lot of times I get into a place, especially earlier in my career, I would fall in love with characters and I would have such a strong opinion of what they felt and where they were as a human being. And I remember I was doing dialogues of the Carmelites, and Mère Marie is one of my favorite characters. I think that she is, I'm not a religious person. I feel I'm a spiritual person, but not religious. But in terms of a woman having the strength to convince her convent that they need to martyr themselves rather than submit to the French Revolution and saying that they renounce God.
Right.
That's incredible strength to
Incredible
me.
power.
I went into that just absolutely like having very, very strong ideas about her as a human and the production I was doing. It was in Europe, and it was one where she was a bully. She damn near killed the first prioress. She slapped a nun. You know, like she was a really abusive person in this particular production, and it killed me. Oh
Like,
God.
you're missing it.
To do my first Mère Marie in a production where I felt like it just didn't get it. I can look back and understand that the production, it had its place. My manager, who is Parisian, I expected him to hate it. And he came and he saw it and he absolutely loved it. And it was a production that I'm honestly not in love with, but I can respect that it has the power that it does, that the director was able to create a story, a telling of that particular story that touches people.
Yeah.
I did not agree with their direction of my character, but it was a really good lesson to me on being flexible going in. I'm not the director. You know, I am a collaborator. I'm the actor up there on stage. Which in American houses and in new productions in Europe where you have 6 weeks of rehearsal to work with the director, that's not a problem. When you're being plugged into a production that exists already at a rep house like the Metropolitan Opera or at a European house and a lot of German houses, they'll send you the DVD and say, please learn this staging before you get here. You have 3 days of rehearsal and then we're opening the show.
It's an incredible feat in itself. It's totally different.
It is its own game.
It
is really its own game.
The whole adventure.
I have learned to really love it, actually. I don't like going in on those if I haven't already done the piece, I've learned.
Oh, yeah, that would be terrifying.
Yeah. And that first Mère Marie, it was my first one. And it was 3 days of rehearsal, and then we opened, you know. And so there was a large part of me, I didn't have the time or the place to fight for the character that I wanted.
Right.
So it was like I said, a good lesson in learning how to stay flexible.
And I think some of those opportunities make you have some guts too, to just go out there and do it.
Yeah.
And that is a great segue to, I would love to talk just for a second about the competitions, because that takes incredible guts and an incredible amount of focus and mental power to just do it and not let the wave of nerves and the what ifs and the if I onlys and all that stuff that you were talking about. You get a different pile after when you win.
Yeah.
But as you're going in, it's a really incredibly hard thing that you just can't even describe to someone unless they've done it.
Yeah.
What kinds of things do you do for yourself to get so deep in the zone when it's time to just execute?
Quite honestly, for me, it comes down to something somebody told me one time that just changed my life when it came to competitions. They basically made the point that this is my job. My job is to get up and go sing and to tell stories and to move people. I'm good at my job. People keep hiring me, so I must be good at my job, you know? And so it changed my mental state to start looking at competitions as another extension of my job. Granted, this is the job where only one person gets paid.
You do the work first to find out.
Exactly. But I mean, even in some ways, part of my job at that point in my career was also auditioning.
Right.
And a lot of competitions, half of the reason you're there, everybody's hoping to win. Don't mistake me on that. But half of the reason you're there is to be heard by a panel of people who have movement in this industry. So getting in the room is already a version of winning. And so beyond that, just doing my job, getting up there. I'm confident in my job. So people always ask me if I'm nervous at performances. And quite honestly, the answer is no. The first day of rehearsal, I am so nervous. It's ridiculous. My stomach's in knots. It's like the first day of school. I'm always planning my outfit,
Yeah.
There's always those jitters that go into that because, do I know this music? Did I learn it right? Is the conductor going to like me? Is the director going to like me? Am I going to get along with my colleagues? Like, so many questions. But when it comes to the actual performing, I'm not nervous because at that point I'm getting out there and I'm having fun.
Yes.
I'm getting out there and I'm storytelling, which is what I learned from the age of sitting around at a pickin' and grinnin' and loved to do. That's what caught me, was this collaborating to create sound that is pleasing and tell stories that move and captivate. And so the competition setting is absolutely, definitely the kind of situation that is going to have more inherent nerves. But I combat those nerves by just reminding myself that I'm good at what I do. And I just need to go out there and do my job. And if I do my job and I do my job to the best of my ability, then maybe on that day, those people sitting out there behind the panel that are judging me, maybe I'm what they're looking for. And maybe they'll put me at the top of the pile. But that, in the end, doesn't actually matter. What I'm hoping to do is to make an impression on those people so that they go back and they talk with their people who hire other people and say, you know what? I heard this mezzo that I thought had real potential. That is the real win in my book. And that's also impossible to control.
Right.
That's incredibly impossible to control. But if I'm mentally thinking of a long game, it takes me out of the day.
Yeah.
And it takes me out of that momentary, my breath is high and I can hear my heart beat in my sound and I'm sweating so bad that it's just awful. And so many, my hair doesn't look right, like all the nitpicky little things. If I can think of a long game, it takes me out of all of those nitpicky things. And then it enables me to do my job.
Yeah, it's beautiful. What, for your last little golden nugget for us, what would you say to musicians trying to get out there and get started? Do you have anything that people told you, or just some thoughts on, now you've seen it,
Yeah.
now you know what it's all about? It may or may not have been what you expected, but there's a lot of people out there that love it and want it bad.
Yeah.
And what can you tell them as they continue plowing ahead?
Well, I think quite honestly, the first thing that I would say is good luck. I mean, there is so much that goes into somebody being able to have a career in this. And when I say a career, I mean you're paying your bills from doing this. There's a lot. There's a lot of training. There's a lot of time. There's a lot of expense. There's a lot of heart. There's a lot of emotion. There's a lot that goes into this. And one of the pieces, and this is something I always try to make sure I mention in master classes and when I'm talking with younger singers, I really encourage them to maintain their love for what they do. Remember they're doing this because they love it. They're doing this because they want it. And to also be willing to love it even if it's not how they end up paying their bills. Because there are so many people that I know who have gone through the training, who are inspiring artists and storytellers, who by every metric should be in this career and are not. And to me, that comes down to luck. And that's not something you can quantify. That's not something you can control. It comes to some people, it doesn't to others. And that is not a statement against you as a person or your talent as a musician. Sometimes it is literally just the luck of the draw. And that's hard.
It's brutal.
That's one of the hardest things about this particular career, I think, because you can do all that work and not have a career. That happens most of the time. That being said, the other side of that advice that I really, really, really try to hammer home is keep loving it. Because music, while the career is a wonderful thing, it is a God-honest blessing in my life, it's also hard. There is that flip side. And it is not the only way of doing and experiencing music. Some of the most successful humans I know, and when I say that, I mean the happiest people I know, the most fulfilled, the most driven, the most successful humans that I know are people who started in this, who I went to grad school with or something, who went to New York and they tried and they got out there and they had a moment where they were like, you know what? This isn't picking up. This isn't happening. I'm still going to love this. I'm still going to do this in whatever capacity fulfills me. But I'm moving on to another thing to help pay the bills. I have a good friend who went through exactly that. She was top mezzo at Indiana when we were there. She was getting leading roles. Went to New York, tried for a while. It wasn't happening. And so she now works with the Lupus Foundation. She's doing work that she is really passionate about. She uses her skills as an artist in what she does. And she sings recitals whenever she can. She sings at a church in New York. She gets out there and does concerts whenever she can. But it's not to pay the bills. It's to make her happy. And in the end, this is a hard career. You can say whatever you want about it. But in the end, isn't that the point?
Yes.
Music is there to heal, to make people happy. And if it is harming and making you unhappy and you're trying and trying and trying, it may not be the right fit for your career. That doesn't mean that it has to be banished from your life. That doesn't mean that music is not something that you can have, that you can do and be a part of. There are so many outlets. But it's a hard piece of advice. I understand that that's a really sticky thing to say. And absolutely am cognizant of the fact that in essence, I come from a position of privilege, having been lucky enough to find that luck to have the breaks that I've had, to be out there doing it. I understand it's easy for me to sit here and say this, but at the same time, the happiest people I know who haven't gone forward with this career as the bill paying, thing in their lives, those are the people who have still maintained music as something that makes them very happy. And it's still a major part of their life. It's a big piece of their puzzle, but it's not the thing that pays off their student loans.
Yep. And it's not all or nothing, and it doesn't mean you failed as a person.
Exactly.
Which I think is a really hard thing for people to separate.
Absolutely. Yeah. It's especially, I'm speaking from the position of being a singer, especially, your instrument is your body. It's really hard to go into auditions and to get rejections. And because they are, on some level, it feels like they are rejecting you, that they are rejecting your instrument, your body. That's really personal.
Yes.
But when it comes down to it, it is also a business. It is also, it is the cold, hard fact of, this is something that is not personal. I think at the end of the day, everybody's hoping for a personal experience when they go in and see a concert, and casting directors and producers are definitely trying to find that right fit for what they need, but it's not in the service of saying, and everybody else who sang for this is not good.
Right.
Everybody else who sang for this is a terrible human and an awful musician.
Right.
No, it's just, sometimes it's just the fit.
Yes.
And if it's not working, then I say self-care comes first. But
beautiful. Thank you so much. That's a great thing for everyone to remember as they go on their journey.
Yeah.
I appreciate so much your time today.
My pleasure.
Thank you. Thanks for listening to Inside the Notes. I'm your host, Erica Block. Check out InsideTheNotes.com for videos and more information on our guests. Follow Inside the Notes podcast on Facebook, Instagram, and Twitter to receive more information on our next guests.